The population of Africa is set to double by the year 2050 to 2.5 billion people. The young are moving from the countryside to the towns.
Unfortunately for us, in the last 2-3 years, it's been a deluge.
But many end up in slums, and cities are struggling to cope. An industrial revolution could transform African countries and lift millions out of poverty.
Every year, to sustain this growth, they will need to create 20 million jobs every year for the coming decades.
But idle youth could mean millions more migrants and drive many into the hands of Islamist extremists. And that is everyone's problem. There's nowhere in the world where women have more children. Half the girls here are married by 15. So it's not surprising that children have children. This is Zander in southern Niger, on the fringe of the Sahara Desert and not far from Nigeria's northern border. Niger is one of the world's poorest countries. It's mostly agricultural, and the average number of children born per woman is 7.6. And in Zander, it's a lot higher than that. So the government and aid agencies are trying to do something about it. Tucked away out of earshot, girls as young as 10 talk about topics many adults here consider taboo. Family planning, contraception, early marriage, and even forced marriage. 3 older girls take the lead. The aid workers who have trained them call this the safe space class. Saratu is 27 and has 4 children.
One of the things we are teaching girls here is about early marriage and the consequences of having children before they are 18. During the delivery, a girl can lose her life or the child could die. Before this program, women had many kids, but with the coming of this program, the number of children is really reducing.
Who decides how many children you should have?
My husband. He decides that.
And that's the crux of it. The husbands decide. And so, they started a husband's school.
If you give your daughter away at 12, it could be a disaster.
The conversation is just as open on this side of the village.
Having fewer children helps the woman to be able to breastfeed properly.
Before we learned from this program, many of our kids weren't healthy, but now we don't have a problem.
That's Madaha Musa. He's 27 and is one of the more enthusiastic converts to the fewer kids philosophy. He and his wife Hadiza have 3 children.
I come from a big family. My father has 3 wives. I have about 16 siblings. I'm not actually sure how many we are, but I think we are 16.
The idea that more children means more hands to help on the farm doesn't ring true with Musa anymore.
No, if someone has 10 children only, 3 or 4 of them are healthy anyway. So it's better to just have 4. That's better for work in the fields. Truly, there is a problem here with having too many children. But now we have been to husband school, we know more. We can have a child and then wait for a while before we have the next one.
Even if some people do change their minds and decide to have fewer babies, the dramatic growth in population will take a long time to slow down. By 2050, the number of people in Niger will have way over tripled from the 21 million it is today. The culture here is to have many, many children, and traditions are hard to shift. But this is the way to do it. Show them what the options are at a mobile clinic. Another case of tackling taboos head-on. And from the crowd, Nana Aisha decides to have a 3-year contraceptive implant in front of everyone, saying she's had 3 kids and she's happy with that for now.
I decided to do it in front of everybody so that they can see how it's done. Because before there was some kind of rumors that while doing it, it hurts. And they see themselves today, it doesn't hurt at all.
And it did persuade a few skeptics. Nana Aisha said her husband had given her permission. In fact, it was his idea. He's educated, she told me, and he'd heard the men from husband school talking about it. They're small steps towards bringing the birth rate down. This population explosion matters across Africa, but more so in Niger. All these young people are a bonus if a country's on the rise, but can also be a burden.
La non-maîtrise de la fécondité a pour conséquence immédiate.
The immediate consequences of having such a high birth rate is that it's impossible to feed, educate, and care for all these children in the short term. In the long term, the very survival of the country is threatened unless we take this window of opportunity to make the most of this youth dividend. It could threaten the survival of the country and encourage different things like terrorism and immigration.
There are a few jobs in the countryside. On both sides of this border between Niger and northern Nigeria, Islamist group Boko Haram recruits idle youth, or they migrate north to Europe up through Niger. Those who can head to big urban areas. From here in remote Yenoko village, we followed one man who's left to make it big in Lagos. It's a well-trodden route from this quiet rural village to the city. Mukhtar Abdulhamid's family are talking about the son and brother, the husband and father, who left his wife and 1-year-old boy behind. We don't have money to eat, she says, so we had to send the boy to go and look for money. He sends around $100 every now and again, which they use for the farm and for food and clothes. It's quite a contrast, moving from a village of 7,000 people to Africa's largest city. This wasn't quite what Mukhtar Abdulhamid had in mind, but optimism is emblazoned across his chest.
When I arrived, I thought it would be easy, but then I realized how much harder it was to get work. But you can't just sit here without a job. I want to buy and sell, to have a shop in Kano, and to make enough money to go back to school to get a Western education.
Every day, thousands of people arrive in Lagos, Africa's largest city, looking for the same thing, a new start in life. Many end up in the slums, struggling to make a living.
Lagos has always had that mixed blessings of having to deal with the influx of people. Unfortunately for us, in the last 2-3 years, it's been a deluge. We want other people to be here, to bring ideas, to bring values, to bring innovation, but we're just unable to deal with it endlessly.
This is what an African megacity looks like. It's crowded, it's chaotic, and it's crumbling. Lagos is already struggling to house, to look after, and to educate the way over 21 million people already living here, let alone the millions more that are predicted to crush into this city. But there's an incredible energy about the place, and it's a matter of tapping that and using creative thinking to turn it into an opportunity. The AO Festival celebrates historic old Lagos. in the overcrowded urban slums. The masquerades represent the spirits of the dead, returned to cleanse the city of evil and pray for peace and prosperity. Emerging from the rusted tin roofs is one answer to the AO's prayers: building up.
Lagos has no choice but to go up. How are we going to accommodate all the population? We have to go up.
Latif Shubello spent 25 years as an urban planner in Los Angeles. Now he's brought his skills home.
So now that we are able to go vertical, we are able to reduce the overcrowding. So it gives us the advantage of the airspace, which has been lost.
Tower blocks aren't a new idea and are expensive, but Lagos needs to renew without moving people out. One answer is creative financing, to lure private investment into affordable housing.
So currently we are looking at different areas we can come up with to introduce some of the ideas that I brought from Los Angeles and see which one is applicable and usable here.
This is the other way to deal with slums. This was a Todobame community, cleared in March, despite a court order protecting it. Many people fear they'll be next.
Over 40 communities will be under the threat of eviction, and 300,000 people will be rendered homeless eventually if this action is carried out. The moment you demolish a slum, naturally 2-3 slums will spring up because people need where to sleep.
There are two main industries in these slums: fishing and dredging for building sand. But the beach is quiet. The people say the security forces came and smashed up the boats.
I am very angry. They destroyed my boats and my husband's boats. We have no money and we've had to withdraw the children from school.
The state government cites security reasons and says people are never forcibly removed. But people here think it just wants them out.
All of this community were demolished so that the bourgeois, the rich, would benefit from it. So I feel strongly that the state government is interested in the land and we're not going to give in.
The basic reason is land grabbing, to be honest with, because Lagos state government have seen that the waterfront communities are prime land.
Lagos will be a financial hub for Nigeria.
And there are big plans for luxury waterfront living. A vast area has been reclaimed from the sea for a Manhattan-style development, and there are many other building projects.
All right, great. So as you know, we're in the east end of the site, and then between Landmark Towers and the Hard Rock Cafe, we have the hotel that's being built right here.
Paul Onwanabe is developing a 5-hectare, $100 million site. Lagos has to balance a modern vision against its growing inequality.
I think there'll always remain the super rich, and there'll always remain the people just simply below the poverty line. But the hope is that, as you know, over the next few years, you will see that gap bridged as more people get more jobs.
The only way to manage a massively growing megacity is to invest in infrastructure, whether it be power lines or rail lines. This will be Nigeria's first ever electrical light railway system. Within 10 years, they want 6 of these lines, crisscrossing the whole state, keeping Lagos on the move. But the city is outgrowing efforts to house, employ and serve its people.
We are in an urban age and people are going to keep coming, so we just have to find more creative ways to accommodate more people.
Climate change, drought and a doubling population are already testing the continent's capacity to feed itself. And by 2050, a quarter of the world will be Africans. Farming needs to be much more productive. Kenya is at the forefront of a big international effort to create better plants that produce more crops in the harshest conditions. Smallholder farms here could easily produce 4 times as much food. Sami Nduvi is one of the guinea pigs. He's replaced most of his maize with a mixture of what are thought of as old-fashioned crops, like millet and peas, which put nutrients back into the soil.
These days we are getting less rain than we used to, and when I plant these crops, I know I'll harvest something, unlike with maize. The millet and the pigeon peas normally resist the drought.
He's also been given new improved plants, hybrids he's very happy with.
These peas are bigger, they mature faster, and I can get 2 crops in a year rather than 1.
And that's where the science comes in. Finding the best strains means crossbreeding hundreds of plants to isolate the traits they're looking for.
What we're seeing right now is a finger millet breeding where we're trying to combine traits, characteristics from different plants into one plant so that we end up with a superior plant that is early maturing, high yielding, drought tolerant and resistant to major pests and diseases, but as well as being highly nutritious.
And this new DNA profiling lab in Nairobi makes that process a lot quicker.
This machine tries to understand the differences at the DNA level in the populations of 101 crops.
It's not genetically modifying, but by sequencing varieties of 101 carefully chosen traditional African food crops, they can go straight in to find the best performing strains.
Instead of a random selection of hundreds of progeny, we go for selecting only those types which contain the signatures from high yield and the signatures for drought tolerance.
But then nutritionists have to get people excited about these crops in a place where maize is everything. And so to cooking school in rural Kenya. These smart foods used to be staples in Kenya before colonialism brought maize along. They're more drought resistant, more nutritious and pretty easy to rustle up into all sorts of meals.
A piece of the chapati, well I got 2 there, and this is the pigeon pea stew. Right, great, on it goes. A little bit of everything. Pigeon pea stew first.
Four young farmers from Kenya and Tanzania have been chosen to put their farming skills to the ultimate test.
And the other thing is to persuade young people to stay on the farm. This reality TV show is Kenya's attempt to make farming cool.
For a challenge of a lifetime.
Particularly to millennials, otherwise leaving the village for the city.
My main problem is the blight.
Okay. It shows that farming is a business, that money can be made. And also helps older farmers up their output. Making smallholding more productive and profitable is one step towards growing enough food. But for the demographic dividend to be cashed in, people need jobs. Agricultural revolution is the precursor to industrial revolution. And here in Ethiopia, there's a grand plan. The first industrial park was built in Addis Ababa, but the biggest has just opened south of the capital, in Hawassa.
Welcome to the Hawassa Industrial Park Grand Production Inauguration Ceremony.
Ethiopia is flying high in Africa. It has the fastest growing economy, albeit from a low base, and has become the darling of international investors.
Hawassa Industrial Park is a phenomenal project.
The architect of this new industrial revolution is meeting executives from some of the world's biggest textile companies. He built it and they came. Ethiopian workers already have jobs making the fabric, putting the garments together. The pay isn't great, she says, but it's not just about money, but about building a better future for her and for the country. Ethiopia's big solution to the population explosion is putting its young people to work. They're building these vast industrial parks across the country, putting in infrastructure, training up a workforce and attracting foreign companies to make their shirts and their skirts, their suits and their socks here rather than in Asia. As in much of Africa, China has a hand in the expansion and sees echoes of its own dramatic growth.
Why did we choose Ethiopia? It has a stable political situation and a peaceful society. and is the second biggest country in Africa. Without a big population, there is no market.
There's a huge amount of building going on across Ethiopia. The scale and ambition is impressive. Row after row of government-built social housing. A new electric railway to whisk imports and exports between the capital and the coast. Perhaps the most visible sign of Ethiopia's economic growth is its airline. It's been dramatically expanding over the last 10 years. It's government-owned. Ethiopian Airlines now flies to 96 cities around the world. What better advert for a country on the rise?
We can learn from China that making investment in the long term in infrastructure is quite important. Population is growing by about 5%. So we need to create close to 1 million jobs every year. So this is a big challenge, and manufacturing has significant impact in job creation. This now provides an opportunity for what we call the demographic dividend. But without having a policy very aggressive and ambitious as Ethiopia's targeted economic growth, it will be difficult and it will be a source of crisis.
Aggressive policies in Ethiopia mean a heavy hand. Protests were crushed. A state of emergency's just ended. There are questions over authoritarianism and lack of freedoms.
Building democracy sustaining requires efforts for many generations, and we recognize that, and we are going to put more effort despite the achievements we have.
Ethiopia has also built a lot of universities, focusing now on engineering and technology rather than arts. But what about the dilemma? What is more important? Is it economic growth, or is it freedom of speech and democracy?
It's not like one is more important than the other, but definitely economic growth is a means towards democracy, right? It's a path for democracy, it's a path for freedom of speech, because if there's no education in the country, if people are still hungry, what are they going to speak about?
Industrialization isn't the only answer to Africa's population explosion, but it's already creating dividends for Ethiopia's economy. If it gets the balance right, this could be a model to put a continent to work. And in much of Africa, that's a big ask. In poor countries like Niger, it seems the economy won't come close to keeping up with population growth. In rich ones like Nigeria, it comes down to good thoughts and good actions, even if the speed and scale of urban growth offers its own set of challenges. This African population explosion is coming, and its impact will be felt across the globe, for good or for bad.